and welcome to Deep In Pact, a proud member of the Doof Network, where we dive deep into Wildbow's most inhuman work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
That's me. And this chapter, Execution 13.9, for those of you who didn't read the title of this episode, this chapter, we continue to watch Blake as he... as he recovers from killing a few more husbands. He comes back to join the rest of his team, and Green Eyes immediately suspects him of the worst crime of all, hogging the food.
This bit is so good.
It's good, isn't it?
I think I was, legitimately just laughing out loud for maybe 30 seconds at this bit.
Yeah.
It's had so much build-up for this joke. It's great. And obviously, I think it sets a really great tone. We're about to head into... basically half a chapter dedicated to Blake and Green Eyes' relationship, and I think this sets a really good tone for diving into that. Yeah.
Green Eyes is, carries the first half of this chapter. Like, she's so good. And it feels like she's really settled into the group dynamic. And I can't quite put my finger on why exactly that is, but it's just kind of, she's bouncing off the others in this chapter really well.
I think it's just a familiarity thing. She's actually hung out with them more. She's hung out with Evan. They're friends now, kind of. I think they are. So I think it's just, time has led to them developing. She's got a good relationship with both of them now. Also, the satyrs are there. That probably helps.
Yeah, the satyrs are also add a fun little beat. I wonder how long they'll stick around. Maybe they'll be a permanent member of Team Blake. That'll be fun.
For everyone but Blake, yes.
Well, yeah. So one of the satyrs basically fills in Blake on where the spellbinder may be. They don't really have a good idea, but they kind of try and use some common sense to deduce it.
So in case you didn't pick up from Ruben's emphasis there, listeners, he spelt sense as in the smell scent, like common sense, but spelt... Yeah. It's a pun that doesn't really work in audio.
Let's move on. It's a hilarious joke that if you can see the script they're reading off, it really works. And I'm not going to be tied down by any kind of formatting problems. Okay?
We'll put it in the description of the episode as well.
Yeah. But let's talk about this scene with the smells, right? Because it is really good. Like, these satyr are clearly just trying to fuck with Blake, and Green Eyes is kind of going along with it just to make him jealous, and it's just totally working on him.
I don't think she's doing that at the start, but she definitely uses it to her advantage in a little bit. There's a bit later on where Blake is thinking on all this, and he's like, I don't like that they were manipulating Green Eyes like that. And it's like, Blake, come on.
Yeah, they clearly weren't manipulating Green Eyes. They're manipulating you.
Is not the one being manipulated here.
Yeah.
His lack of self-reflection is really starting to hamper his ability to know what's going on right here. Just the whole first half of this chapter can really be summarized by me saying I wanted to pull out almost every single line and just talk about it. Yeah. Everything Green Eye says, everything Evan says, everything the satyrs show him in with is pure gold.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
Yeah, this is some of the best just like character interaction humor stuff we've had in a very long time in this story.
Yeah, I didn't want to pull any of that out because I knew we'd just start pulling it all out if we did. So I put out some other stuff. There's a bit where Blake notes that the bell is still ringing, and he frames it as saying the bell is familiar enough at this point that it was almost like a friend goading me to take a dare. Just do it, and it'll be satisfying. Which is a worrying way to describe this bell, and it kind of makes me think, I wonder how much the bell kind of feels familiar to Blake, whether it's because it's been ringing for, a while now, or just because it might feel like Molly.
I guess the issue I have with that idea is that the Molly that exists right now does not at all reflect the Molly that Blake or / Ross would have grown up with, I think.
Exactly.
But yeah, this is just sort of another little reminder that the Belle and therefore Molly is still around, because we haven't really seen her since Blake and her had that half-finished conversation after he ran off to kill some husbands, which he's been doing a pretty good job of all this. Like, I think she's going to have to eat crow a bit and give him some credit. But yeah, I guess I am just interested for her to pop up. That applies to so many things right now. This arc has really dived into just Blake, Green Eyes, and Evan being off on their own, and like we have no idea what the Cabal's up to. There's sort of a lot of where are Rose and Alistair? We haven't heard from them in like 8 chapters.
Yeah.
I can't wait for hopefully next arc to start diving into all these other people.
Yeah, or speaking of eating crow, we haven't seen Corvidae in a while, so that's obviously a dangling thread that's still out there.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff. I've really enjoyed diving into this victory over the Duchamps this arc, but I can't wait to take a step back and see what nightmares everyone else has been going through in the meantime.
Yeah, it really makes me wonder what Molly's up to, because we did have that half-finished conversation. And then later on in this chapter, Blake says something, he notices the bell again, and he says, like, oh, Molly must be asleep or busy, because otherwise she'd definitely be here. Which, again, feels very on point. Like, Molly should have taken an active stake in what's to come later on. And I really think something's going on that we will see soon. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still kind of holding on to this theory that maybe Johannes is pulling her strings to an extent. And if that's the case, it might have something to do with that. I don't know. Because like, as far as we know, Johannes is basically the only player who, in this whole game of this disaster of a night, has just basically been able to sit in his domain and be like, off you go, guys.
Yep, you guys sort it out, and I'll be here at the end.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know. I'm also skeptical as to whether Molly might be having some influence on Blake and stuff. You know, he talks about how eerily lucky he's been tonight. And, you know, maybe some of the credit there is going to end up having to go to Molly. I don't know. Like, I like his interpretation of this just being because he's, like, committing to a role that the spirits and the abyss really like, and so he's being rewarded for that. But, I guess we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, I think explicitly that's kind of what happened last chapter with the Benevolent, but beyond that, it's kind of hard to tell whether his good luck is because of the role he's playing or just, I mean, who knows what.
Yeah, I mean, just the way he phrases that luck has been eerily on their side just jumped out to me as, oh, should I be thinking that there's something else to accredit this to? Like, you know...
Yeah.
Are Johannes's genies helping him out in the background or something? I don't know how they work. You know, it could be anything, but it's just something about the way that line was phrased made me like put my tinfoil hat on because I thought it was telling me to.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see, I suppose. So Blake doesn't really have any ideas on how he's going to find the Spellbinder, and so for the first time in his life, he decides to stay put, which is an interesting and very un-Blake-like plan, but whatever. He basically suspects that the Duchamps will figure out that he's hunting down these bad husbands and head to meet the Spellbinder to protect him, and Blake can just follow them right to him.
Yeah, to be fair, the plan of wait and see, like this sort of stakeout that happens, is the result of everyone trying to talk him into let's stop. So this is kind of his like halfway compromise. Okay, we'll do a stakeout plan. That isn't how he phrases it, but like you could sort of read it that way, I think. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It works. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's a good plan. No, it works. I mean, yeah, I guess kind of is right, but it does. It seems to work at least.
Yeah.
And it does give them a chance at like relaxing for a bit, which is a very passive, non-Blake thing to do, but I think it's good.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good middle ground. It lets him stay on mission, but it also lets everything relax for a bit, which lets us do this great character stuff that we really do in the first like 3/4 of this chapter.
Yeah. So the other thing that happens here is Green Eyes cozies up to Blake, and Blake kind of encourages it. Like he leans into it, right? It's this
literally and figuratively.
Yeah, exactly. Right, and this ship is taking off, and I'm really happy for it. Until Evan ruins the moment, but let's just stay in the pre-ruined moment for a little bit.
I'm really struggling not to just pull out this whole bit and talk about it. Yeah, so I think obviously the sort of really meaty part of this bit is the bit where Blake kind of acknowledges that he's left enough of his humanity behind that this doesn't freak him out like he thinks it should.
Yeah.
And my understanding of his thinking here is he kind of thinks, well, since this relationship will be so unique because we're both these very unique others, he doesn't really have to worry about the sort of traditional, like, you know, issues he has with relationships, like particularly around like physical contact and it being used as a weapon or a tool. And I mean, I want to agree with him because I'm kind of getting on board with this ship pretty hard.
Yeah.
But I mean, Green Eyes literally was just used against him like 20 ones before he has this thought.
Yeah.
And then obviously there was like the vision in the drains where he was like Bat Blake in the future, and he was with Green Eyes there, and I don't think that was meant to be like an ideal scenario. So
No.
I don't know. I want to believe in this, but I have serious concerns about the logic of why Blake thinks this is a good thing here.
Yeah. I guess you're right. I can't not be on board with it, you know?
Yeah, I do know. I am still kind of on board with it.
It just feels healthy for Blake to have a not shitty relationship.
Yeah.
So Blake's stakeout, the Blakeout, let's call it. It works. Tens of Duchamps come out of the house and start heading off, and Blake and co kind of prep to follow them, but unfortunately they seem to notice him, and Sandra uses some magic to have them power walk away really quickly, I guess.
Yeah. They kind of duck off real quick, and it's like 20 or more people, right? I think is how it's phrased. Yeah. So you do immediately sort of get the sense that she sees this as very big and very important, and this is just following on from our talk of special numbers that we have that obviously delivers at the end of the chapter. Yeah. I guess the other thing I wanted to bring out from this part is Blake takes note of the goblin familiar and how it's got the axe back, because he left it there on purpose, because he doesn't want to have to fight this thing again.
He doesn't want it to come after him for the axe.
Yeah, I don't know, because he's like, I don't want to have to fight a goblin of that caliber again. And it's like, I thought he did all right, I guess. I don't know. I mean, you know, compared to like, this thing didn't seem as bad as the hyena.
I don't know. He didn't really beat it. It shot Evan, and then he used it to chop off someone's head. Like, I don't think he landed any solid blows on this thing.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder how this thing is meant to compare to the hyena on paper.
Yeah. I think I seem to feel like it's roughly equivalent. Like,
yeah,
Blake kind of mentioned that, you know, the hyena went around collecting trophies in terms of eating others, and this goblin collects trophies in terms of subjugating others, right? That feels relatively equivalent to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sandra's little power walking magic trick here is pretty cool. In your live read, you mentioned it was like manipulating their connection to space, which I like as a description. And it even gives them a little bit of like color shifting as they speed walk away, which it all just kind of comes together to be a nice bit of magic use that I like.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's sort of happening and you're like, what the fuck is going on? Which is, I think is kind of the reaction you want from new magic.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But me suggesting it was altering the connection to space was just me trying to map like Speed Force-esque powers onto enchantments, and that was the best I could do.
No, I think it works. It's nice. So the Duchamps power walk away, and the satyrs get the scent and bloodhound after them. And so Blake's crew catches up to the Duchamps fairly quickly, only to see a strange little scene in the middle of the road. There are two mags, and seemingly the Spellbinder has caught Padrick, allowing Mags to regain her original name, Maggie.
This is so much fun to read the second time.
Yeah.
I mean, I did have to throw away all the rants I was preparing on how this undermines everything that went on in Signature, and how this was a huge step back for Mags's journey. Obviously, in retrospect, that was just yet more clues as to what was going on. But yeah, I don't know. I love this. I think, as I've said before, my favorite twists are the ones that make me feel like an idiot. And here's a nice little quick one.
Yeah, it's a cool little trap, isn't it? Like, from a literary sense, because it obviously Pact, we've talked about how a lot of it kind of recontextualizes itself, meaning that you can reread this story endlessly and find more and more things, right? And this is one that happens in the exact in one chapter, so we get to go back and immediately reread it, and there are so many things that work on you know, these two layers, right? The first layer of how does this work with Mags now being Maggie and Sandra trying to turn her against Blake, and then how does this work with the actual layer of what's actually happening. And I pulled out an example here where Maggie, when Blake is trying to figure out what's going on, Maggie, in air quotes, says, "I'm Maggie again," Maggie said. She smiled, but it wasn't the smile that should have gone with a statement. She hugged her arms close to her body. And this is obviously, like, it jumps out as being a bit weird, right? And then you kind of contextualize it 3 different ways. The first is, oh, well, this is just an awkward situation, so of course she'd be a bit off. And then the second is, oh, okay, I understand now. It's because Sandra's trying to turn her against Blake. That makes sense. And then the third one, you're like, oh, it's just Podrick being tricky with his words.
Oh, just enjoying re-performing his favorite role.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, again, much like the first half of the chapter, there's just a dozen bits of this conversation I want to pull out for how brilliant they work on the second time.
Yeah.
There's a bit about Maggie saying that she's not getting what she wants in terms of her family, which at first you're like, oh god, what's happened to her dad's? But of course, my understanding now is that Podrick probably just wants his family killed, but he's not getting that. I don't know. There's a bunch of bits.
There's so much good doublespeak, right? I've pulled out one more that I really liked, where Blake says to her, once I mused on how similar we were, I said. We might have even talked about it. Do you remember? You'll have to be more specific, she said, staring down at the weapon, which is just like a perfect non-answer, because of course she can't answer that because she has no fucking clue. And it even feels a bit like Blake is suspecting something's up and is trying to see what she says in response to this.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't say, we talked about it. He says, we might have even talked about it. Like it feels like a trap.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I hadn't even noticed that. I think my favourite bit from this whole section is where... So Blake talks about his philosophy on freedom and how it applies to him and Mags.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting because it definitely, I think, works for both of them. Like, I very much agree with this statement that they both want to be free, and Blake tends to give up himself, whereas Mags tends to get more pinned down. And I think what's interesting is Podrick doesn't necessarily disagree that this seems to apply to him too. And I think the more I thought on it, like, we don't know too much about his backstory, but it kind of seems like he's exiled for being a bit reckless and he doesn't play by the rules. Or like, I think maybe it does sort of apply. It definitely applies here. He's clearly struck up some sort of deal with Sandra to get out of some trouble with the fairy court or something. Yeah. And, he is having to do what they say as part of that deal. So I think maybe this description of Podrick as well as Mags is maybe not too far off.
Yeah, and I think that's what's great about this doublespeak is there's a few times where Podrick says what Mags would say in that situation. Like, agrees with what Blake is saying, or because he has to tell the truth, plays into the role, and in doing so reveals a bit about himself that is inherently true, which is fun.
Yeah, exactly. I think the reason he keeps getting to take on the role of Maggie Holt is because maybe there were some similarities there, and maybe that's part of what drew them together a bit. Well,
I mean, they both have
him preying on her.
Yeah, they've both left, where they grew up. They've gone somewhere else, and now they're kind of cast into a different world than they might originally be used to. Like, I think there are similarities between the way the two of them act. I think they even both have a love of drama and the weirdness, right?
Yeah, I agree. There's also a great bit where Maggie gets really tense when she's handed the goblin weapon, and of course, it's because that must have been part of the deal, just to fuck with Podrick, which I kind of like.
Yeah. Classic.
Yeah.
So Sandra, in exchange for getting her name back, is asking Maggie to turn on Blake, and she almost does before she decides to join Team Blake. And so she's backing away from Sandra to side with her allies before Blake figures it out and holds the hyena to her throat. Twist.
It's such good drama. Like, even the second time, I was just like, fuck, I love the fairy.
Yeah.
Like, they're so fun to read about.
Yeah, it's so good, right?
I enjoyed this so much the first time. Like, I think my live read was just me going like, yeah, fuck yeah, Mags, this is great. And then the second time, like, reading through it, I was just like, oh, fucking, this is so good, Podrick. Like, I'm eating this up.
He really puts on a show for us as the spirits, doesn't he?
Absolutely, yeah.
There's this interesting bit where one of the satyrs says, so Green Eyes, like, in this point, sniffs out that it's not Maggie, and kind of hisses, and this is what clues in Blake that something's going on. And, or not sniffs out that it's not Maggie, but just kind of sniffs out that something's off, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't think... Has Green Eyes actually met Maggie? I'm not sure.
No, she... Maybe at one point, like, before the assault on the house started.
At some council meeting-y thing, I don't know. So anyway, one of the satyrs responds to what Green Eyes says and says, maybe don't bite the allies, the first satyr said. And this to me is like, if Green Eyes could smell out that Maggie's off, I guarantee you that the satyr also could smell this out, which means, again, this is the satyr just fucking with Blake and trying to get him into shitty situations, which I like.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. It's a good point. I mean, I guess the thing is, for me, we don't know why Green Eyes saw through the Padraig stuff.
Yeah.
Like, is it like her super other eyes? Was it, I mean, because my read the first time through when I didn't yet know this was Padraig was it's after Maggie flashes Blake a winning smile, and I just thought Green Eyes was getting very jelly. That could still be it. I mean, Blake, because Blake focuses a bit more on the reaction, so we don't know exactly what Green Eyes saw because she doesn't say anything.
No.
So yeah, I don't know, but I do think you're probably right. The satyr might have been able to smell past it. You think they would have a fair bit of experience with fairies, given they've been allies with the Duchamps for a while now.
And I'm sure that they would have met. Like, the satyr almost certainly would have met Mags, whereas I don't think Green Eyes has. So if Green Eyes can tell something's up, I'm sure the satyr would have been able to as well.
Yeah, probably.
So yeah, twist. It's Padraig again. And Blake hasn't fallen for the same trick twice, which is good.
Good on him.
In fact, Blake even says, "Fool me once, shame on me." And Padraig's response is like, "Actually, I fooled you a lot in Toronto."
Which, I mean, that's interesting that Padraig remembers all that. I mean, I feel like that's maybe something.
Yeah, true.
I don't know what to do with it, but it feels like maybe it's something.
Yeah. Possibly because of the connection, fuckery. There's something going on there.
Yeah, the same thing that made Mags immune, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyway, Blake threatens to kill Padraig before basically letting him go after he promises to fuck off until the contest is over, basically.
Well, actually, they just say until this is over. It's incredibly vague.
Yeah.
I'm just like,
nice
Blake,
vague wording against a fairy there.
You should know better than that. You heard what happened to Mags.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, it's great. I mean, as we've sort of already touched on, this twist is fantastic. I can't believe I fell for it again. It's so good.
Yeah. So with that, the spell it's kind of revealed that both the Magses and the Spellbinder were all just fairies. So the Spellbinder's gone, and Blake's not going to get his 7th kill, unfortunately. And he tells Sandra, "Look, I'll drop all this. I will actually help you win the lordship if you want, on the condition that you stop the arranged Duchamp marriages." And Sandra can't agree to it.
This is such a galaxy brain move. Like, this is so good. I love it.
It's a real power play, right? Because this is the ultimate way of dealing with the monsters, right? Either you say to them, "I will stop if you promise to not be a monster," and Sandra can't, and it just means that she's obviously going to lose the support of a lot of the Duchamps. Like, it's hard to imagine the Junior Council not seeing this and being like, "Oh, okay, well, I'm done."
I agree. I mean, this fits into the role he's been defining for himself so well. Like, he has been doing this thing where he goes to chop a lot of people up. He, at least at the start, was giving most of them a chance to prove they weren't monsters. And what he does here is he gives Sandra the same thing, but it's in a very public fashion where he kind of gets to put her on blast for his 7th win.
Yeah.
And she basically kind of has to admit that she's not really any better than him, basically. It really feels like there's this great sense of, like, he's bringing these big, bad, powerful people down, not just, like, physically, like, he doesn't just physically beat them, but, like, he takes the power of their message and just sort of, brings it down. And I mean, there was a very similar language used to describe how his dad operates, which I think is a very nice sort of connection. Like, Barbatorum was all about bringing down power structures or powerful figures, I think was the phrase in, like, Arc 1. And now we kind of see Blake slotting into a role that kind of feels like a mini version of that. He's focusing on the bad ones, so that's good. But he targets, I don't know, there's just something about the way he beats Sandra here. It's not that he physically defeated her and killed her. He's just completely destroyed her standing.
Yes. It's actually, it's kind of more brutal, right? Because he hasn't killed her. He's kind of forced her to confront the reality of what she's actually doing, which is
and brought it out into the open. Like,
yeah.
we saw so much with before it was just about, I'm turning the husbands on it, but even with that conversation between, I think it was like Joyce and Lola,
Yeah.
like he was bringing stuff that the family has been tactically not talking about
Yeah.
up to the surface. And so it's kind of like, this is the point where it goes from he's turning the husbands against them to, I feel like in this conversation, I'm assuming there are other Duchamps around, and this is just where even the family can't stand together anymore.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's rough. It's rough.
Yeah.
And I actually want to touch on why Sandra can't say no here. Why Sandra has to give such an impotent answer. Because like all I can think of is that she's made so many deals that she is unable to make this commitment to Blake. It's not, I don't know, or I kind of, the obvious answer is that she's just kind of beyond the level of corruption that she should be, right? Like that she's just wants to maintain her power. But I kind of don't want to believe that about Sandra. It doesn't seem right.
Me too, but the thing is, she doesn't say... Well, if she was in a situation where she'd made too many deals and she wasn't going to be able to do it,
Yeah.
she could have just said no, right? Like, unless the deals forbid her from talking about it, which I don't know why they would. So her not being able to say yes or no, to me, kind of says that she just isn't in a position where she feels like she can promise that. And that kind of says that, well, one option is that we get the power and we reinforce it by still doing the marriages. Like, I feel like that's sort of the implication of her not being able to say no.
Yeah.
And that's really where she gets lost, I think.
Maybe it's that she doesn't want to say no because she thinks that will even more cause her to lose control of the family. But it seems pretty obvious that what she said was basically the worst thing she possibly could have. Like, if she had done some old mix of like, no way, I don't negotiate with abyss monster terrorists or whatever, there's a way to salvage that and still say no. Or not salvage it, but at least like, give it a PR spin. But she really just falters.
Yeah, and I think it's because she realizes he's right.
Yeah, true.
And I mean, I think that's the thing, like, because you're right. I don't understand why she couldn't just be like, well, yes, if that wasn't something that she wanted to be able to do. Because it's like, obviously, I think the Duchamps are probably going to be on side with it. We also know that a lot of the husbands kind of get tricked into these marriages in a way, like with the whole heirs business of how it's only daughters and they go to the Duchamps.
Yeah.
So there's probably a lot of husbands who also don't think that this family is a good thing.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like, there's no one who's going to be upset by her saying, yes, we're going to end the marriage system. It hurts everyone. I don't think anyone's on board for it. And she still can't promise that she won't do it because she might, my understanding is she might need it to consolidate her power after she's won. And that's why it falls apart.
It's sad. It's sad. Anyway, Blake, with that, has achieved his 7th win over the Duchamps. 6 kills and 1 fucking devastation. And with that, he leaves the family to presumably fall apart.
Yeah, I mean, so next up, Johanna's, right?
Yeah.
Is that what we're thinking?
Yeah, no. I mean, the Behaims have been kind of sort of dealt with. We'll see. They're at least on Team Thorburn now. The Duchamps feel like this feels like it's pretty final for the Duchamps as a family.
It really does. I'm sort of walking away from this chapter with the impression that they're done. I mean, obviously they're still around. We just talked about how Blake has defeated them in a way that doesn't mean that he has to kill any more of them.
Yeah.
But it feels like they're out of the bid for power now. Like it kind of feels like they're going to be maybe players. Like they might team up with someone else. I don't know, but they're not a force on their own anymore.
Yeah, and it kind of feels to me like now that that's done, now that the stuff with Alistair has gone down, and now that the senior Duchamps have been taken out, the junior council is really in an interesting position, right? Because you can only imagine that the Lolas and the other Duchamps that are younger are going to not be on Team Duchamp anymore. And that means they're going to lean more into the junior council. And that seems like it's where Alistair is going too. And now he has the full weight of the Behaims behind him. Like, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens next with the junior council.
Yeah, well, because they were struggling to get the deal signed before because people wanted to see whether where the dice would land a bit. And now, like, you can just imagine the chat room is going to be all the douche-chumps being like, okay, let's sign this agreement, and all the behames will be like, fuck off. So, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where the Junior Council, and particularly Alistair, as kind of a member of that, go from here.
And not to mention the Thorburns, who, as far as we know, are kind of now also in the Junior Council, right?
Yeah, assuming they haven't got banned yet for being dickheads.
But even, obviously Rose is now somewhere in the mix, and presumably if she goes in and sees Ellie, Peter, and Christoph, she'll at least be like, okay, let's find out more about what's going on here. I don't know. I want to get back into that chat room to see what's going on.
I mean, this is... we already talked about this as my list of I want to know what Rose and Alistair have been doing all night.
Yeah.
Unless it's,
consummating
marriage stuff. Yeah, exactly. I want to know what, the rest of the Thorburns and the Cabal have been up to. Corvidae, he's on that list too. Toronto as well. Someday I want to go back to Toronto and see what the fuck all the imps and stuff are up to.
Yep, and the Knights of the Basement and the Astrologer, all those good folks.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so that's the end of the chapter. And actually, it's about to be the end of the arc as well. We've got the interlude next chapter, but this is the end of the main stuff.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to an interlude. I have absolutely no idea what it's going to be about.
Yeah, do you want to give a prediction? Who do you think we're focusing on?
So assuming it is a histories, and we're focusing in on someone, I don't know, it could be Tiff. Tiff would be my optimistic guess.
All right, I could see that.
Just because that introduces us to where the Cabal's up to, and also we had those hints last arc about her past that I'd love more info on, so this is kind of my wish/guess would be a Tiffany interlude.
All right, cool. But before we go, before we wrap up fully, it's time to review the answers to our discussion question. So this discussion question was, the world of Pact is a world of systems. Games are also things made of systems. Which parts of Pact would make for good games or video games, and which parts would be bad?
Yeah, not many people focused on that latter part, actually, which I'm kind of okay with.
People focused a lot on either games that already felt like they meshed with the systems of Pact, or specific systems that would make really interesting games, which I really liked as a discussion question. I really liked reading about people jumping onto one of their favorite systems in Pact and extrapolating it out into a card game or a video game or something. It was awesome.
Yeah, exactly. I had a lot of fun reading these. I really need to get into the Reddit threads more often, so I'm not reading them all 4 days later, because it would have been great to talk to people about some of these ideas.
Yeah.
But let's get into them, I guess. So the first one I want to talk about was from Brawl 97, who sort of focused on the idea of like the practitioner world politics, and like how great that could be for a sort of sim type game. Or they also mentioned a visual novel, and I actually quite liked the visual novel idea. I don't play visual novels, like I've sort of seen a couple, and it's not really my thing. But I've got to admit, I think it would be a good fit for Pact, in some ways, because I think the thing I associate visual novels with a bit is like a sort of choose your own adventure type thing. Like I guess I'm probably thinking more along the lines of like a Telltale game, but without the point and click bits that are just annoying anyway. But like I like that idea of navigating the world of Pact through these kinds of prompts that you have the choices of picking.
Yeah, totally. I think it's a really cool idea. I really like the idea of there's complicated politics here. Actually, I think Brawl 97 described it as a complex web of fuckery, which is very on point.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
but like I think just the angle of everyone has to tell the truth is almost enough of a gimmick. And maybe that exists somewhere in visual novels, I don't know. But like I think that's enough of a gimmick for something like a visual novel or Telltale type game to just stand out as a Pact one. Like just that thing where people are telling the truth and you have to navigate that web of fuckery.
Yeah, definitely. I want to pull out an answer by 1945, who basically said, was talking about the rule of 3 and how it would be a great system for leveling in an RPG in a non-experience points kind of way. So like every time you do something, the third time you do it, you get better at it. So you kill 3 goblins, and after you kill your third goblin, you have like a +1 to killing goblins, right? It's a really interesting thing because I've actually played a few role-playing games, like pen and paper role-playing games that have systems like this where instead of allocating skill points, you kind of naturally become better at the things you do more often. And I think it leads to some really interesting mechanics. So I quite like the idea of this rule of three, or even what Blake seems to do is do something twice and then hold the third one in your pocket for when you need it, which I think would be a really interesting mechanic as well.
Well, I think the really interesting thing about the rule of three in Pact is it's not just that you do it 3 times and it's better. It's that the third one is more important.
Yeah.
So, like a game that also kind of punishes you for losing the third one could be interesting. Like you would like again that would feed into your idea of holding and pocketing the third one because it becomes more important, and if you fuck it up, that's also not good. So depending on when you spend the third one, you might get rewarded or punished more, and then that could lead to very like adaptive sort of gameplay where you have to change your playstyle based on how like a chance encounter went against your third goblin or something.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a really interesting idea to lead to some emergent gameplay, so I just thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah. I wanted to bring up one by Sir Psycho. And I'm just going to talk about Megafire 7's answer here as well, because they both sort of talked about Dishonored, the game.
Two separate people both made references to how systems in Pact remind them of Dishonored.
Yeah, it was funny. When I read Sir Psycho's first, I was like, oh yeah, of course. And then of course Megafire brought up, because they're both right. Like the chaos system in Dishonored, which for those who don't know, it's a kind of karma-esque system in the game, but what happens is, as you play, basically, the game tracks how much chaos everything you do causes. So, if you get an enemy to shoot their teammates or something and break a bunch of, like, stuff in the scene, that adds more chaos, and then that affects what other characters think of you, how the later missions are structured based on how much chaos you've sowed in the area, kind of like a radiation-esque thing. But it's a bit more unique, I think, than just some games will have like good karma, bad karma.
Yeah.
Dishonored really stands out with this concept of chaos and how it actually kind of feels a bit more like Pact karma. I actually think this is probably one of the closest I can think of as to somebody implementing a Pact-ish type system in a game, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a pretty cool analogy. Something I also really liked about Sir Psycho's answer is the vibe of this past arc of Blake just hunting down different husbands has felt a lot like a video game already, where it's like each chapter is a different level. You got to figure out what the husband does and then kind of set up the scenario that allows you to kill them. It does kind of feel like a fun, if gruesome, video game.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of does feel Dishonored-y in a way, yeah.
Yeah. I want to pull out an answer by Beard of Valor as well, which I thought was very cool. They touched on the thing that we haven't seen in a while now, but back before Blake became a full-on monster, his tattoo would change based on what he thought was his karma at the time, right?
Yeah.
And Beard of Valor pulls that out as quite a fun way to represent some of these systems, like a chaos system or a more traditionally like a good or bad system in the kinds of games that offer those branching paths. But in a way that feels integrated and not just like a bar that you look at to see like, oh, how good is my character?
I like the fuzziness you could add with that. Like, I think the game, when I think of good and bad karma, the game that jumps to my mind that I've played is Infamous, which just had a thing in the top that showed you how far along good versus bad karma you were, and it was just like a needle going up and down. I like the idea of something that obscures the specifics a bit more from the player and has to leave them guessing a bit, particularly if they're not immediately familiar with what is going to be good or bad karma.
Yeah.
Like if you threw me into the world of Pact without context, I would probably get a lot of things wrong about what's good and bad karma or what just doesn't matter, because I have very different values to karma.
Yeah. The other thing I really like about it is if you put this system actually into the game in a more authentic way, it means you can mess with the players a bit more, right? Like, because, I mean, in Pact, Blake thinks it's a measurement of his karma, but it's really something slightly different, which is a measurement of how infested with spirits he is, right?
Yeah.
And I love the idea of having a twist on what a player thinks is one mechanic, but actually it turns out it's another mechanic. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, I can see that working. But I think you could even just stick to, if you had fuzzy karma, so through some sort of imprecise measuring thing on the screen, and then built a game around encouraging you to like gather karma but not hoard it. Like, we've talked about how opportunistic others like Blake will come and find you if you've got too much good karma and take care of it. So like building the system around gathering karma but then also spending it and not wanting to hoard too much. Like I think that could be really fun.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I'll pull out one more, which was by a user called Monkmoo, who talked about how the concept of I forget what the word is, like being an artificer or even just like summoning spirits and managing spirits and goblins that turn into tools would be a really fun like deck building card game. And they gave an example of having cards like summoning an ice ghost and using the ice and ghost cards to create something like June and then binding that into a hatchet card to make yourself a little trinket that you can use in the game. It's like a fun little deck building mechanic that I really kind of liked the idea of.
Yeah, I mean, I could even see it going a little bit beyond artificing to just... you could have other specialties too. Like it could be like creating an other or something,
Yeah,
like
totally.
With some branch cards, human bone cards, and a suicidal tendencies card. You could create a Blake.
An affinity for birds card.
I could see that working. I think as Monkmoo discusses, you would have to. Like, the real trick here would be balancing the game and sort of making sure it doesn't just spiral out of control complexity-wise. But, yeah, I don't know. I thought it was a good idea.
Yeah.
I just want to pull out one more from Nov Alistair.
Nov Alistair.
Who talked a bit about the idea of, like, trying to put an audience-type thing as the spirits. So they gave the example...
Oh, yeah, this was a cool one.
Twitch plays Pokemon. Talking about how you could sort of have a player. So the sort of example that they briefly discuss is if you had a streamer and then the audience were acting as the spirits, getting to make judgment calls in the game. And I think games that incorporate the audience via Twitch is something that is sort of some games are starting to do that.
Yeah.
And I think there's obviously a lot of consideration you have to make there because it's very easy to end up with a shit audience, for example. We all remember Twitch Plays Pokemon, the PC. So you'd have to have some management, but I don't know. I thought this was a pretty cool idea. Novalista moves into a lot more talking about maybe having an MMO where people can log in as spirits.
Yeah.
And make decisions on what other players are doing, which again, feels... very abusable, but if you could somehow build it so that it's not, I think it could be a really cool idea.
Well, I actually think it would work better if, instead of having an MMO where you can either play as a practitioner and have all those classes, or a spirit and have some other classes, I would actually, if I was going to make a game like this, have it be separate games. Have some people play an MMO, and then other people are playing a different game where they're just the spirits, right? And it kind of reminds me of games like League of Legends that had crowdsourced moderation. So if you're not aware, they used to have a thing called the Tribunal where you would act as a moderator. You'd watch replays where people were banned and you would vote on whether they had done the thing that they were not banned, but reported, sorry. And you would vote on did they do the reportable offense that they've been flagged for? And so it was like a community organized moderation thing, which actually they ended up discontinuing it because it had its own set of problems. But I reckon those problems would actually accentuate and make it work better for something like Pact where the spirits are fallible.
Yeah, well, especially, I don't know, maybe this isn't the right fit for Pact, but if you had a game where there was an acknowledged 24-hour delay in getting the results of your karma, then you could make that work if that's asynchronous. Yeah,
I think that would be quite cool. Anyway, some great answers that people left. So thanks everyone for doing that.
That was a really fun discussion. But it is Monday, which means it's time for a new discussion question.
Yay!
And so I've written this one, admittedly, kind of on the assumption that we're right and the Duchamps are gone now. And so this discussion question is: should Blake be proud of how he took down the Duchamp family?
Yeah, let's make a moral judgment. We're the spirits. We're the analogy for the spirits in this story. So let's judge, is Blake in the right with how he handled this whole Duchamp situation?
Yeah, because I think, I don't know, I don't think anyone's going to make the case that it was a flawless victory. But I'd be interested to see people's takes on, does the good outweigh the bad?
Yeah. Did he do the right thing, I guess is the question.
Yes.
Speaking of doing the right thing.
Yeah, I was waiting for it.
Speaking of doing the right thing, if you want to check out some other great podcasts on the Duff Media Network, head on over to duffmedia.com, where you can check out great shows like Do the Right Thing.
Yes, I also think either very soon or it's just happened, another episode of What You Say is coming out, which we obviously always plug that show. It is fantastic.
Yeah, it's a killer. If you want to leave your thoughts on this chapter, or indeed leave your answer to our discussion question, you can do so in our discussion thread, which we linked in the show notes down below.
Yep, and if you don't like Reddit, you can head on over to Twitter and hit us up at MediaMD Podcast.
Yes, I did actually tweet a Pact meme today, so true to our word, there are now Pact memes on our Twitter feed.
Hold on, I'm just looking up Twitter.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, just look it up. Live check it now. Everyone go to twitter.com/MediaMD podcast and check out this great meme for yourself.
Oh, yes. Okay, I did see this one, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It's a good meme. Good meme, everyone. Go check it out.
If you like memes or Wildbow discussion, great place to get your fix of either is on the Duff Media Discord, which you can gain access to if you're a patron of Duff Media.
Yes, surprise. So head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia to join the community today.
Yep.
And while you're there, swing by patreon.com/wildbow, throw him some money too, and then he'll write more stories and, good.
Yep. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right, Elliot. But that's the end of our episode. But don't worry, we'll be back for an interlude pretty soon. In fact, on Friday, the 29th of November, for Execution 13.x. So we will see you then.
See ya.